What's a scary or disturbing fact that would probably keep most people awake at night? You could have a brain aneurysm with zero symptoms. Any day it could rupture and kill you from significant blood loss. Happened to my mom's friend right in front of her. The seemingly perfectly healthy woman died at 40 without warning during a work trip and while having drinks with her friends. 1 second she was laughing, the next second she was on the ground. Never woke up again. My poor mom was the one that had to call her husband and kids. Happened to my grandmother who was in perfect health. Happened to a classmate from high school at 22. Nicest guy ever. Fell asleep on his couch at home and died. Aneurysm and blood clot are the two types of death that scare the shit out of me. Silent killers. Yep, and there is no cure or treatment. There are some medicines that had some effect against the disease, but once you get it you're almost surely dead. Edit 1. The amoeba needs perfect environment to survive. Warm and kinda still water, like rivers, lakes, pools etc. with poor maintenance are examples of that environment. Thermal pools are also a good example. Edit 2. Until 2012, there has been 310 confirmed cases. It has been detected on all continents, except for Antarctica. Edit 3. Surprise, you can get the amoeba from tap water as well. Some people have actually used tap water to clean their sinuses and got the disease. Edit 4. Research has shown a lot of people actually get exposed to the amoeba, but only a small part of the population gets actually ill. The serial killer Richard Chase would try random houses to break into. If the door was unlocked, he saw it as being an invitation. If it was locked, he saw it as a sign that he was unwelcome. You just made me double check my front door was unlocked. When I was younger I was in my room one time, home alone. I heard our front door open and someone come inside, while everyone was out. Hours later, every comes home. I asked, no one had stopped by. It always made me very uncomfortable. I only really heard the sound of them coming in, not leaving. I was burgled a few years ago. It was about 2 a.m. and I was sat at my computer wearing full headphones, and an Oculus Rift headset, home alone. It's only when I took it all off and went to get a drink, that I saw all my downstairs doors were wide open, as well as the rear exit door. It still freaks me out to think someone could have been stood right behind me, and I would have had no idea. When swimming in stagnant water you could inhale an amoeba which eats its way through your nose and then eats your brainstem. You can get a brain-eating amoeba from the water park. There is a spider, Cindy funnel web spider, that has fangs so powerful that it can bite through a leather boot. It usually attacks multiple times and you have to grab it and pry it off of you. It is also incredibly deadly. Because of its venom it is the deadliest spider. Let me guess, it's from Australia. Yep. Another good reason to never ever leave Canada. The spiders here are small and not dangerous. People who sleep less than 6 hours a night are at an increased risk to die prematurely. My husband goes to bed very late and recently read this information. This was enough to put him in fear of God for 3 days, after which he returned to his old habit. Edit, but I like the irony that this information is what would keep people from sleeping lol. Gonna put my phone down now I think. It's estimated that there is somewhere around 25 to 50 serial killers that are active each year in the US. 1 per state. Nice. That's 49 for Florida and 1 for Alaska. Out of 300 million? That's reassuring AF. When an autopsy is performed, the organs are removed, weighed, sliced and placed into a plastic bag. This includes the brain and tongue. Once they're finished, they put everything together in the plastic bag and place it in the chest cavity. So when you're buried, your brain is actually in your chest. In the future, archaeologists are going to think that's just as weird as we find ancient Egyptians putting that stuff in jars. Why is the tongue removed? This bothers me more than anything else. So they can't scream. The frontal lobotomy was performed with no anesthesia and it was an outpatient procedure. Even funner facts. 1. It was performed by sticking an ice pick in the tear duct, punching through the skull, and swishing it around in the brain tissue. 2. There was no way to gauge or predict its effectiveness because you were just swirling it around in brain tissue. And the funnest fact of all. 3. Because of number 2, patients were often kept awake and asked questions during the lobotomy to see when their mental performance/behavior changed to determine when the lobotomy was done. Edit: the guy who invented and popularized it won a Nobel Prize. Many pandemics come in waves and more people died in the second wave of the Spanish flu than the first. The question was most people not all people geez. It's been hypothesized that the subsequent waves were more deadly because the virus had mutated to cause a cytokine explosion, which COVID-19 already does in its current iteration. It's also been shown that the second wave had a W curve, which means it was killing healthy folk in their 20s and 30s. Fortunately, we have good reason to believe this won't happen again given our ability to immobilize the severely ill. The weaker strains are the ones more likely to continue to linger on as asymptomatic and mildly ill folks wander around in public. The stronger strain which have been hospitalizing and or killing people are less likely to continue to circulate because, well, they're hospitalizing and killing people instead of wandering around Costco in search of toilet paper. Back in 1918, our soldiers were being transported through camps and trenches to medical tents and the like while healthy soldiers were ordered to hold their ground, ultimately exposing far more people than necessary to these stronger strains. This allowed them to continue to circulate long after the first wave has plateaued and flattened out. 30% of the weight of solid feces is dead bacteria. I read in my microbiology book it's closer to 40 to 60%. There are a fair number of missing nuclear weapons. Edit: I used to work for a U.S. intelligence service on a project tasked with recovering these things. It was, simultaneously, the most boring and terrifying year and a half of my life. Pigs will eat humans if given the chance. So will tigers apparently. If an imploding star were to create a gamma ray burst, and it were to hit the Earth, we'd never know it. Because we'd simply cease to exist. Poof. I might be misremembering, but I think we'd have a bit of a notice. The neutrinos produced would hit very slightly sooner, order of minutes, so we'd see a neutrino burst that doesn't obliterate us first. In the 70s-80s, the first case of many Southeast Asian refugees in the US who died screaming in their sleep was recorded. This was common for Lao Hmong men who lived through the Cambodian genocide and CIA recruitment for the Lao Civil War. It's theorized that this was an extreme form of PTSD. One story, the man had stayed up for days fearing he would be attacked if he slept. He drank coffee and lied to his parents about sleeping. He did everything he could to keep from sleeping. When he finally fell asleep, his parents thought this crisis was over. Then they heard screams in the middle of the night. By the time they got to him, he was dead. He died in the middle of a nightmare. The crazy part of that is how vivid dreams can be. He was probably reliving whatever horror he went through a second time. These stories were what inspired Wes Craven to make A Nightmare on Elm Street. Someday, one last person will remember you for the last time, and from that day forward, no one ever will. It's called the second death apparently. Well, it could totally happen before your first death. Unless you go into history by doing something. Even if it's something like the guy who made the biggest sculpture of himself by only using his feces. Someone will always find that literal shit online. You probably already escaped death or serious injury in your lifetime by simply being in the right place at the right time. I chose not to get in the car when my childhood best friend went to the store for cigarettes at his housewarming party. One broken tie rod later, and I'm still here while he isn't. My family were going to go someplace in Asia or something. My mother found out she was pregnant with me and cancelled the trip. Couple days later there was a massive tsunami in that place. Lots of people died. They made a movie about it as well. If the mall would have been open and I would have been at it, I probably would have been killed by a tornado last week. On average, you will walk past 36 murderers in your lifetime. Hopefully the next time you do go past one, they'll say, "No, not that one, too good looking." Back about 10 years ago I went to this pizza joint for lunch and this one guy brought a slice out to me. That night he stabbed and killed a guy. I'm just glad I didn't complain about my slice being a little cold, could have been big trouble. False vacuum decay. The fundamental properties of the universe might suddenly decide to change one day. It might be an insignificant change, or so great that all matter would just cease to exist, and we wouldn't see it coming until we blinked out of existence. You are far more likely to be murdered by someone you know than a stranger. Ha, joke's on you, I don't know anyone. You can actually wake up during surgery. But the worst part is that you are still paralyzed. So you can feel everything what they do to you, but you can't signal to them that you are conscious. This is one of my worst fears. The one that I remember most often is this one: either we are completely alone in this universe, or we are not. Crazy to think about, but cool either way. Well, how are you there? Are you okay? Leave a comment. And subscribe to this channel if you wanna see more same videos.